Hey, welcome back. I'm Dean Tuvey. This is How to Manage Tech. What I want to do now is talk to you about the integration of project management and IT service management. Now, what I'm going to show you is a slightly traditional view. I'm going to show you ways in which we integrate things like DevOps and agile, Scrum thinking. But this is a traditional way, largely trying to avoid too much waterfall here. All you need to do, though, is bring in some of the iterations to make it a bit more agile. But I really just want to take you through some of the basic steps. This is really important for project managers to understand what ITSM practices are going to be available to your project that you need to be mindful of, designers and stakeholders that you'll need to engage with. From the ITSM point of view, this is going to show you how work is done in project modality. Just what you can see here on the screen is you can see originally my framework diagram, and I'm just going to zoom in on that now. So what I'm talking about here is the combination of the ITIL framework. I'm going to put in Prince2 there, which could be substituted with PMBOK or Agile Project Manager, as well as a little bit of DevOps in there. All right, now what I want to do is I want to talk to you about how to integrate a project into all of this. So let me just start by then saying, okay, a project is traveling through an organization. It's been born, the idea has come out of somewhere, it's been built, and it's moving through the organization through a series of stages, if you like. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to carve out a space that I'm going to call the IT service management space. Now we're going to go through a number of stages. What I want to emphasize is that project exists within an organization. The organization doesn't stop running just because you're running a project. The organization's operation around you needs to continue. So as a project, you need to be aware of these different stages that you're traveling through. There exists standing planning resources, particularly long-term strategic planning resources. There are various standing teams and authorities that will need to be consulted as part of the project design. For example, security. You will have security staff in a larger organization, or at least some security responsibilities. Adding in here transition stage through into the run or operations, as it were, there's an improve stage. Now what I'm just going to do is I'm going to change color for my project modality. All right. Now what I want to do here is I'm just going to use some basic Prince2 stuff, which is fairly universal in the project world. And what I'm going to do at the beginning is add a project mandate, and at the end a lessons learned log. And then I want to do the first piece of integration with IT service management. Project is kicked off with some kind of mandate. Now this is a Prince2 concept, but it occurs in other formats, but it's some kind of initial seed. And Prince2 mandates a thing called a lessons learned log, which is all the lessons that you've learned throughout the project and what their impact is going to be on future projects that are being run, for example. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut to my ITSM mode, and I'm going to add in some ITSM, ITIL practices that bracket the project. They're going to be where the project came from, and also that will take over once the project has finished. So I'm going to add in our portfolio management. And what it's going to do is it's going to provide that mandate in the form of, say, a business case or a proposal, a service charter. In the strategic section, portfolio management is fed by a number of other practices. The major driver of your portfolio should be your strategy, as well as strategic changes being made out of your learnings to the portfolio as we go. Let's add those in now. Change requests coming in. Here's my strategy, which should be largely feeding my portfolio, as well as my business relationship management practice, which is getting ideas from customers, discovering new needs that the customers have and making those to possible solutions. Okay, what I want to show at the end is what happens when a project packs up. So let's all add that in now. There's going to be a go live. And that's when our project's going to transition the first increment, if you like, the first piece into the run space. And we're going to call that stage of our project, it's like a rollout, but we're going to call that the deployment. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have a project closure and a handover to continual improvement, right? And what that's going to look like is these lessons learned and other ideas are going to be handed over to an ITSM practice known as continual improvement. And what it does is it operates a thing called a continual improvement register. So I tell you what, let's draw the continual improvement register like some kind of system. I'll just indicate that as a database. For example, I was going to do it as a document. And what that's going to do is invoke a practice known as continual improvement. In other words, the project delivers like an 80% solution, and then via continual improvement, we're going to harvest good ideas and do the 83, 84, 85%, etc. in an ongoing fashion. Here's the first sort of setting that I've got, where your project has been kicked off by a bunch of existing practices around strategy and portfolio management. And when it concludes, it's going to hand over the solution to some kind of ongoing change process, if you like, which is continually improving it. And this is where you get into things like Scrum, which continually roll out updates off a backlog. Our project goes live. It's an 80% solution. There's a whole list of bugs and new features to be added to it. They go on to a Scrum backlog, and Scrum then bangs out updates possibly every week, possibly every month, maybe even faster than that, based on a daily basis if you're using something like a DevOps. Now what I want to do is I want to just add in some of those practices that we had a look at earlier in the plan lesson. We discussed the fact that your portfolio is going to be constrained by the resources you have in terms of, say, financial, by the levels of risks that you're willing to take, as well as your architecture is also going to put some boundaries on what it is that you can do. So let's now go and have a look at the design stage. We saw before that a project is kicked off by something like portfolio management, some kind of impetus in the form of a change request or a business case. And what we want to do here is we want to invoke design planning. So we might have a design center, we might have designers, engineers, and so on. And it's the job of the design activity to design new products and services in our value chain. Let me draw you a few pictures and you'll see what I mean. So I want to add in the service design practice, right? And this is like a design center. As I mentioned before, they're going to be doing things like human-centered design. One of the first things that service design does invokes service level management to go and start negotiating what is going to be an appropriate level of service or performance of our service for the solution the project's going to roll out. Service level management then is going to invoke things like availability management. So this is going to be planning for reliability, redundancy, failover, and so on. Capacity, which is going to deal with performance, speed, throughput, volume, as well as forecasting and scaling. Continuity, which deals with DR. And security, of course, information security, whether our data and our information is protected appropriately. And you can't have a conversation with these, what I call 4 engineering practices, without also having to talk to your suppliers as to what their platforms and what their offerings and what their products are capable of providing to you. What I'm trying to say then is that as a project manager, you need to engage with these typical roles in an organization. You need to go and find the security manager. What they're going to do, for example, is hand you a security risk assessment, which I've used in the past, pro formas and templates if you don't already have them, and they are going to take you through a risk assessment of your solution. So you're kind of getting loaded up with the design requirement as a project manager that you're going to need to satisfy in order for you to pass all the checklists and to be able to go live at the other end. And the net effect is that the drafts of all of these documents and risk assessments and design elements and so on in that service design package. So here's my service design package. And don't forget, this can evolve too. We might be able to do a bit more of a top-down design, but the bottom line is we're going to need to have some sort of thinking there. Now, one of the things that comes out of design planning is we've actually got enough of a design, we've built enough of the solution to now start making changes to live environments. So what's going to happen is change requests are going to start to occur. Now, there's a really important point here. When projects build a solution and start getting ready to operationalize that solution, they're actually entering the highest risk stage of the whole game. So as we get to the end of our project, potentially our money's starting to run out, our staff are exhausted, we're potentially delayed or late, and yet the transition to the live environment is the riskiest stage of all. So by leaning on existing practices within the organization that I'm going to help you build, by the way, things like release management, test capability available within the business, deployment capabilities and methods and so on, by leaning on these as a project manager, what happens is you de-risk this transition stage. And so increasingly what's going to start to happen is you hand over more of the rollout of the project during this deployment stage to these permanent practices, permanent teams, permanent processes and toolings, right? All of that gets triggered by starting to raise change requests, major, medium, and small. Remember, this is a high-risk stage. This is launching the boat out into the water. These change requests then are going to start triggering the work of release management practice, which takes care of the build, test, deploy, coordinating that, along with early life support. So release management bridges that crucial go live stage from the workbench into the runtime real life operational environment. We've obviously got to dev, test, for example, and this is where our change request and our multiple changes, one or more, are going out to release. We've also got running here our configuration management practices, where we're documenting all of our components and how they relate together as they're being built, as they're being required. And I'm just indicating with these arrows that that's across all these stages. We're also building up our knowledge and, very crucially, ensuring that not only are we transferring hardware and software into the live environment, but we're also, very crucially, transferring the knowledge that we're going to need from the architects, the experts, the designers, and so on, into the live environment, into the user community, into the service desk, into the operational staff that are going to have to support this. What does the operations space entail? So we're live with our new solution, and typically it's fragile in its early days, right? Despite all our best efforts, there's going to be incidents that we need to respond to. There's going to need to be on-the-spot training and coaching and so on. We've got problem management kicking in to do the debugging. We've got service requests where people are asking for information. What we also see in the operational stage is event management, now monitoring and giving us a heartbeat and a pulse on this thing, as well as reporting and measurements of our actual operational performance. Join me on the next one, where I look forward to helping you learn how to manage tech. If you like this video, then hit the like button and subscribe. Remember to hit the bell notification so you'll be updated when I release a new lesson.